Some Ottawa homes sell in honestly just 1 week, but others, they need 60, 90, even 120 days. And the difference usually comes down to 3 things. Before we get into it, please like and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and it lets other people find this video, find this channel, people just like you who are looking to buy, sell, or just even talk about the market. And if you don't know, my name is Jimmy. I am a real estate agent here in Ottawa. And if you want to work with us, there is a link in the description below where you can click and book a call to find a time with me to chat about whether you're buying, selling, or even just to chat about what's going on in the market. Okay, so look, Ottawa is not a hot market right now. It is a balanced market. And in a balanced market, the homes that sit are not sitting by accident usually. They are often pretty specific reasons, and I want to walk through 3 of them with you today. And I'll say this up front, one of them is going to surprise you because it has nothing to do with the price of the home. But I'll get into that into the second point. Now, the first reason homes sit, and this is honestly the most common one, is price. But not in the way most sellers think about it. Ottawa prices dropped about 5-6% in 2023. And since then, we've seen, yes, some recovery. But we're roughly back to where we were in 2021 for prices. And a lot of sellers, and especially ones who bought or were thinking of selling during COVID pricing, well, they're anchored to those peak numbers. They remember what their neighbor got at the peak of the market in 2022. And that number is still in their head. It's just, the problem is buyers aren't anchored to 2021 prices. They're shopping in 2026. And in 2026, we have more choices. They have more inventory and a lot more patience to wait. What they're gravitating toward is something more move-in ready, something they can walk into and be done. They don't want to walk in and immediately start doing math about what they're going to have to spend after closing. So they're price sensitive, and the gap between what sellers want and what buyers are willing to pay is growing. And honestly, a lot of sellers are carrying some regret from not selling during those COVID years. And the emotional weight makes that even harder to have a rational conversation about where prices need to be. And I get it, but that's the market we are currently in. It's challenging if sellers are anchored to past prices, but buyers are paying in today's numbers. Now here's one that is really surprising and also one of the more painful items, is that when you are slightly overpriced, buyers often don't call to negotiate. They just scroll right past your listing. They're looking at your listing online. They compare it side by side with, let's say, 3 other comparable properties in the same area, and they just move on. You don't even get a showing possibly. And this is where it gets even worse. Your listing starts working against you because of this. So buyers use these overpriced homes as a comparison point. They look at your place and then go, well, this other one that looks just as good is $30,000 less and it's fairly comparable. So you're actually helping sell your competition. Your overpriced listing becomes the reason someone buys the house down the street. So overpricing, it doesn't mean just fewer offers. It means fewer eyeballs on your property overall. And that leads to fewer showings and 0 offers. Now, in a balanced Ottawa market, if your listing is priced right, you should be seeing around 10 to 12 showings in the first 14 to 30 days. That is a healthy sign of a property positioned well with a healthy market. That's what real market interest looks like. And if you're not seeing that kind of activity and assuming the photos are good, the house shows well, and there are no other obvious issues that are sticking out, then it comes back to price. Price is about 90% of marketing, and we often forget that piece. The first 2 weeks, often they'll tell you everything you need to know. Either the market is responding or it isn't. And if the market isn't responding, you have a decision to make quickly. Because if you wait and start chasing the market down, well, you're lowering your price every few weeks, trying to catch up to where buyers already are. And then that's when a new problem starts. People start to see reductions and start wondering what's wrong with this house. So the first few weeks is your signal if you're priced right or not, and don't ignore that. You will be doing that at your own peril. My second point is outside of price, which is what we just talked about, is the presentation of the house itself. It can quickly kill your sale. And so the first impression is very important. And I've seen photos where you can see the agent's thumb in the lens. Maybe they're blurry or they're bad lighting or bad angles. And it's just not a good look when you're asking someone to spend, $500, $600, $700, $800,000 on a home and you don't have professional photos done. Professional photos, they're not optional at any market. This is the first thing that a buyer sees. And if the photos don't make the home look at its best, well, then a significant portion of buyers, they won't even bother booking a showing. Okay, then there's the presentation on the inside of the house. If the place has been decluttered, if it still feels deeply personal, let's say there's family photos everywhere, the furniture doesn't flow, there's a lack of space, well, then it's hard for a buyer to picture themselves in your home. And you want someone to walk in through the door and immediately feel like it could be theirs. That's the reaction that we are looking for. When you have a home that is overpriced and doesn't show well, the buyer walks in and is already skeptical on price and then all of a sudden get hits with a bad presentation. Now you're fighting on two fronts, price and presentation. And the honest truth with that is buyers decide within seconds of walking in your house. So the first impressions are very important. Now, the listing description, it's still important. Maybe not in the way that it used to be when it was the main piece of information out there, but it still matters. Buyers will skim the paragraph for sure, and they're not going to be reading like the 400 words that you put in there. So the most important details need to be in front and center. We need to catch their attention when they do read it. So recent upgrades, key features, anything that justifies the price, we need to lead with those items. One other thing I use is all caps for all of the key details. Now, does that look maybe a little aggressive? Maybe it's like looking like they're, someone's yelling on the page when you use all caps. Maybe. But when someone's scanning quickly, it makes sure that the important stuff doesn't get buried. If your listing has a renovated kitchen, that needs to be one of the first things someone reads, not buried down at the end of the paragraph. And if you have no floor plan, no walkthrough video, no proper description, well, you're making it hard for buyers to even figure out if the home works for them. And a buyer who can't picture the layout or get the feel for the space online is probably not going to book a showing. They're just going to move on to the next one. And the bottom line is, if buyers can't understand your home from the listing online, they won't bother coming to see it. Days on market in a balanced market when a home is sitting is another challenge that we have to deal with. So around the 30-day mark, something shifts in the public's perception. Buyers start asking why this home hasn't sold yet. And there really is a psychology piece to this. People want to feel like they're making a safe decision. They want validation to know that they're choosing the right option. So when a home has been sitting, the absence of other buyers, it makes other people nervous. And the idea around this is, if no one else is buying this, why would I be the one to take the risk and step up to do it? It's not a rational thought, but unfortunately it is a real consequence. And it does create a cycle where the longer it sits, the harder it becomes to sell, because buyers assume something must be wrong and they don't want to be the one to get fooled when everyone else has passed. So what happens is we end up looking for a very specific buyer, someone who's willing to look past the days on market, do their own analysis, and feel confident going against the grain. And those buyers, they do exist, but they are fairly rare. And in my experience, they often don't budge much on pricing. Most people would rather just move on and feel safe than take the risk. My next point is the one that sort of ties a lot of this together, because even if your price is right and the listing does look good, the market itself is just moving slower right now, and sellers, it's important to know why that's happening. So let's think about what happened in the early 2020s. Those COVID years of pricing, well, the market was moving extremely fast, and quite frankly, too fast. A lot of people, they ended up buying at these peaks and then are now potentially feeling the consequences of that. So buyers, sellers, maybe people are refinancing. There are real stories out there of decisions made in 2021, 2022 that didn't really work out for people as much as they hoped in today's numbers. So with that information, people who are looking today, they're being more deliberate because they've heard these stories. They might have known someone who bought something and is now expressing either their regret or their frustration or their worry about where their value, their asset is. And so they're using this market, a market that has more inventory, longer days on market. There's not as much of an urgency as their chance to slow their own process down and to get it right, to try and avoid those same mistakes that were happening during the COVID years. And then you combine that with more inventory in the market, more options for them to choose from, and you get a buyer pool that is genuinely just not in a rush. Now, certain properties in prime Ottawa locations still get multiple offers. We're still seeing that. But as a general market indicator, buyers know they have leverage and they're using it right now. What felt like what happened is that the COVID era front-loaded half a decade of buying decisions. And what's left is people who are more patient and more cautious and are willing to wait. Now, this next item is pretty straightforward. Days on market is longer, months of inventory are up, new listings are up, sales are down, and buyers are reading the news and they're following the market and they feel like there's no reason to rush. Because they're not wrong either. In most segments of Ottawa right now, that's relatively accurate to what's happening, which means sellers can't count on urgency or a rush to do any of the work for them. The reality is when buyers have options, sellers have to be the best option for them. The market that we're currently in today, it does remind me a little bit about what a market was in the mid-2010s. There was uncertainty in the job market, which is what we're sort of seeing again in the public sector. Interest rates are manageable, but they're not necessarily like exciting. Or price growth is hovering around 2 to 3% per year. So that's keeping up with inflation, but there's not a huge amount of growth there. So there's not much momentum. There's little ability to piggyback on a strong spring and then to carry that into the fall. So you have to be positioned correctly and priced well in order to sell. Timing matters here because if there aren't active buyers in the market, well, your listing is going to sit regardless, no matter how well it shows. And when myself and other agents say positioning, all that we really mean is your price relative to comparable listings. So it's not just like matching comparable pricing, but you have to give buyers a reason to choose yours. I mean, you can't just equal the other properties out there. You need to be able to somewhat give an incentive over them. Here's what I tell most of my clients who are selling. Most homes in this market are selling for about 2% below list price. That's where typical sales are landing right now. And the conversation looks a little bit like this. We build your list price knowing that number. So leave enough room in there for a buyer to feel like they negotiated, that they got a little bit of a deal, and we get to that 2% below the number. That way everyone walks away relatively happy and it feels like a win-win. What happens is where deals fall apart when the gap gets to about 5 to 6% more, because buyers just don't offer what they want to pay. They want to play a little bit of a game. It's unfortunate, but it just does happen in sales. So they might lowball you, maybe we counter, maybe you try to meet in the middle, but if the gap is so wide, well, buyers and even sellers, it's really hard to make up an offer to build or bridge that gap. The thought process goes, they just figured, well, even if I put an offer in, it's going to be an insulting low offer. Maybe there's going to be an extremely low back and forth where the gap just never changes, and then it doesn't really go anywhere. So they basically just wasted a day or two of everyone's time. So essentially, most buyers just move on without having to even try that. So if you're a seller watching this, that's the positioning conversation you need to have with your agent. Price it where buyers can reach you within that 2% number, because if they can't reach you there, they won't even give it a shot. So those are the 3 reasons Ottawa listings are sitting right now, price anchored into the older COVID market, a listing that's doing more harm than good, and buyers who are taking their time given the realities of what we all went through in early 2020s. So if you're sitting on a listing right now and something just sort of feels off, or you're thinking about listing into this spring in 2026 and want to get ahead of these mistakes, click on the link below in this description to book a call, and we can walk you through your specific situation that you're in. All right, thanks very much for watching, and see you on the next one.